Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's your boy Ron James back for another episode of the Buckeye Roast. As you can see, I am currently by myself, apparently in the dark. I have not been able to get my lighting set for 2 days now, but we are still here. The show goes on. I don't know what's going on with Mother Nature, but I have zero light coming through this window right here that naturally lights the show most days. So it's throwing off my normal lighting setting. Still haven't been able to figure out what's going on there. Q is having internet issues in Arizona. Prayers for whatever is happening to the internet in Scottsdale. But we are here. We have an action packed show. And as you see on the graphic, we got a special guest. So we are going to get right to it. Our guy, Anand, is back. Our probably our most frequent guest on this program. How you doing, man?
Man, Ron, it's good to be back. It's funny because it seems like we get to this once about every 3 months, so it's kind of a in for me.
Absolutely. I said we're about a quarter of the way through the season. We got to check in with Anand and see how non-conference play went.
uh, as good as advertisement, there's always something to complain about, you know.
Absolutely. I said it was hard to do a show because normally we have plenty to nitpick about. And for the first 3 weeks, I'm like, I really don't know what you want me to tell you. Like they're doing what they asked. Will's better than advertised, but we got plenty to talk about. I mean, I guess we'll start right with the quarterback. Will Howard, better than expected, worse than expected, or exactly what you expected?
On my end, I think he's been a little bit better than expected. There's obviously some limitations there that other QBs, like top 15, top 20 quarterbacks in the country just don't have. But they're doing so much around him that I don't know that it matters. You know, it's very much the like Craig Krenzel's probably the last one that we really had that we supported like this, where your O line is very good, your running game is very good, your receivers are very good. Just don't lose games. And when the time comes, we're going to need you to make 3 to 4 plays a game. That's it. That being said, building a roster that's capable of doing that against really good teams is very hard. We haven't had one of those in a hot minute. So, I think in terms of what Will's performance solo has looked like, I think he's been very good. Has he been elite? No. Has he been, dynamic, life-changing? Are we looking at Johnny Manziel 2.0? Are we looking at Marcus Mariota at Oregon? No. But at the same time, he doesn't have to be that. And I think that they're sending him the messaging and they're coaching him in the same manner that, you don't have to be that. We don't need that to win a national title. We don't need that to win the Big Ten. So I think in his case specifically, I think when you look at what Will's done, he's taking what's there. He's kind of taking all of the stuff that he did very well at Kansas State, reading out offenses. He's excellent at RPO. And Ohio State's QBs haven't needed to be excellent at RPO in a long time. But if you're going to run the ball the way that Chip wants to run the ball, you kind of do. And I think that's his biggest strength. And it's shown up over and over again when they've called him. And, when you're basically making triangle reads and figuring out whether you need to pull the trigger or run the ball. So all things considered, if we're grading, so to speak, Will Howard through, 0 games that matter, but enough that we want to talk about them, we'll go with like the A- B+ somewhere in there.
How do you feel about Will Howard through non-conference play versus how you felt about Kyle after Notre Dame? We're about the same point in the season. Kyle gets the big win. It still looks shaky. He almost throws an interception against Notre Dame that ends Ohio State's season real early, and they drop it. The Buckeyes get a win. We get the infamous "Where is Lou Holtz right now?" interview, and the season goes on. Do you feel more confident in Will Howard and what you've seen so far versus what you saw from Kyle at the beginning of the season last year?
Yeah, I think if you talk to anyone that's willing to remove the scarlet and gray lenses for a second and look at them objectively, it's pretty clear that Kyle McCord's probably a little more talented purely as an arm, especially if you're looking to level up. But Ohio State hasn't needed 5-star arms to win games. Like that. I think that's the misnomer here is, yeah, CJ was freaking awesome. Justin was freaking awesome. Dwayne was freaking awesome, right? Like, but the games that Ohio State grinded out against teams that they probably had similar talent to, the games that we've really kind of held on to as wins, didn't require superhuman quarterback performances. I think the lone one was probably Justin against Clemson. Um, CJ against Georgia, he was outmatched. Like, I love all my Buckeye fans. You guys know that Georgia team was not comparable to the 2022 Ohio State roster we brought there. I'm not saying that they weren't, side by side when you talk about everybody being healthy, but that's not where we were. Down 2 wide receivers, down 2 tight ends, down 3 running backs, down multiple linemen. Like, that was, you shoulder the load and carry us to the promised land, and he almost did it. I don't think that Will is capable of that, and so I think the health of this team matters a lot more than the health of that team did. That being said, the fact that he's willing and able to run and that they're also okay with letting him run tells me 2 things. One, they feel pretty good about Devin and Julian behind him, because you're not going to run him. We saw it with Justin. A great example, right? Like, we saw it with Justin where they wouldn't let him run. They wouldn't let him run. They wouldn't let him run. You get to Clemson. All right, we're unleashing hell. We don't care anymore. I think in the same way, Will Howard's been very good. I think, you can look at what Kyle has done, and they're probably in similar spots. That same like A minus B plus grade, maybe a B for Kyle, just a half grade down. But they're not asking them to do similar things, and I think that's what makes it tough. Is, I think they're asking Will to pilot an offense, and they were asking Kyle to make a few throws. So, just based on where they are right now, I think it's pretty clear that Will is significantly beyond where Kyle was in terms of operating the offense. But he just doesn't have the 5-star arm that lets you get away with that throw on whatever it was, 3rd and 21 to Emeka at Notre Dame, 3rd and 17, whatever it was. He just doesn't have that arm. And I think they're, cautious and a little bit understanding of the fact that that arm just isn't in this offense right now.
Agreed there as far as the arm not being in the offense. You brought up the backup quarterback situation. I know we have plenty to talk about, but I think I want to jump in there and I want to ask you, is Devin Brown Malik Murphy? In the
No.
sense that while last year we saw Quinn Ewers go down, Arch Manning, superstar freshman on the roster, but you still saw Malik Murphy come in when they had to win games during a playoff chase. It seems like a lot of people in Buckeye fandom right now are confused by the fact that Devin Brown keeps coming in as the second string quarterback despite the hype around Julian Sayin. But I feel like Ryan Day is telling the world, the team, Devin, Julian, that if Will gets hurt, Devin's the guy. I think while this could be Julian's team next year and he is the future of the team, every time you see him come out as the backup quarterback, it signifies to me that if Will Howard gets hurt, Ryan Day is not ready to put the weight of a national championship run on the shoulder of Julian Sayin yet. If we see Julian Sayin come in before Devin Brown at some point this year, it would make me feel like that guy is the backup. But at this point in time, it seems like Ryan Day wants his backup quarterback ready in the event that he has to have someone shoulder the load of the expectations of this team. Where do you stand in what's going on right now with this rotation? Because I'd make the argument that if this guy is who you're putting in next, if Will gets hurt, that's who you need to be preparing, not preparing for the next year, because at the end of the day, it is this season and we do have championship expectations.
Yeah, I think, it's pretty clear that they're more comfortable with where Devin is than where Julian is. And that's a delicate balance, right? It's Will Howard's a rented gun. We love him. He's one of us now, right? Once a Buckeye, always a Buckeye, but he's a rented gun. You have 1 year with him. That being said, it sucks to say it in the manner that I'm going to say it, but I'll just say it anyway. Like, if you were comfortable with Devin Brown being your starting quarterback, Devin Brown would be your starting quarterback. They wouldn't have gone out into the portal to look for Will Howard. There wouldn't have been, murmurs about Cam Ward or any of the other transfers that were coming in. And part of it is injury, and that's just the name of the game. That's the way that life goes. But I think that the really tough part for Devin specifically is, you had a path when you got to Ohio State. I think every QB that comes to Ohio State is trying to convince themselves that this is my path to starting here. And for Devin, it's all but gone. If you're Air, you're trying to compete with Julian next year. If you're Tavian, your thoughts are, by year 2 that I'll be able to compete with these guys and potentially take over one of them. Devin's window is just kind of run out, and it's not necessarily his fault. He didn't do anything wrong. He got injured at a very poor time, and Lincoln is as good a kid as he is. That's not a quarterback that at Ohio State specifically that you can throw out there and feel good about. So, when you look at this quarterback room as a whole, I think what they're trying to tell you is we know how talented Julian is. He's going to be awesome. He's going to be a really, really good football player. But asking to put the weight of the world on a freshman is totally unfair. And when we went to camp, that's what we were trying to protect everyone in Ohio State fandom from. Is we know what Jeremiah Smith is. That is a once in a lifetime, generational, whatever phrase you want to throw at him that we shouldn't use for anybody is applicable to him and him only. But he's still a true freshman. Like, don't forget, there will be moments where he is still a true freshman. It's fine. He's one of the best players we have on our team. He's easily in the top 3 or 4. But he's still a 19-year-old. He hasn't done this for very long. There are going to be moments that you want to work through. And I think Julian's in that same spot where the talent is so apparent and the fan base so badly wants the splash plays. You watch your example, like an Arch Manning go in for Texas. Last year, you watched him go in there and create a couple splash plays. And I get it. I know why you want to see him over a Malik Murphy, but if your goal is to win a national title, Malik probably gave you more than Arch did last year, because if you're a championship caliber team, you're not as concerned with raising your ceiling as you are with keeping your floor.
Absolutely. And I want to read you some stats. 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 66.8 QBR, 550 yards. Any guess whose stats those are?
Run that back again. Sorry.
5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 66.8 QBR, 550 yards.
I don't know.
That is Isaac Wilson, a true freshman quarterback at Utah, Devin Brown's high school backup quarterback. So for all of those who say that this guy can't play, even if it's not at Ohio State, I think we're going to see something similar to what we're seeing in the Kyle McCord experience. While Ohio State might not necessarily be the final home, but at the end of the day, these are 5-star quarterbacks being asked to play at the highest level with the highest standards. And I would honestly argue that Ryan Day's quarterback room probably is the hardest quarterback room in the country to exist in, not only because of the competition around you, but the expectation that Ryan Day sets for his quarterback. So and you see what Kyle is able to do despite the loss, despite the heartbreaking interceptions. He's still out there fucking tossing the rock around 300 plus yards almost every game. He's putting the numbers up, and you're the NFL guy. There has to be someone rubbing their hands together. Like, I could make that work.
Yeah, he's to me, the comp has always been like diet Matthew Stafford. There are going to be some what the fuck are you doing interceptions. There are going to be some, oh my God, you threw that. Why would you throw? Okay, it worked out. There's a lot there. I think Kyle's game is interesting. He's grown a lot. You're starting to see him trust his pockets. You're starting to see him, at this level specifically, get to his third read. I think a lot of it is not his fault. At Ohio State specifically, you were trying to develop quarterbacks, but really you're trying to develop your starting quarterback. And a lot of the rest of it gets kind of thrown by the wayside as, you get your rep or two here or there. But they're preparing people to start. and they're preparing people to start in our system. They're preparing people to ultimately make NFL careers. And the only real way to do that is to give the lion's share of reps to your true ones. And he got a lot of them last year. It was, we came on here a year and a half ago almost, and kind of discussed, there's 1.5 million, stories about Devin Brown being named the starter, or, Kyle being named the starter, and, the back and forth that went through there. I think at the end of the day, I think they thought that they had something that they didn't, which was a team that you could lean on, and the quarterback just has to be an ancillary piece. And we got to Michigan, and, look, right tackle holds up for 1/8 of a second, and we're talking about a very different story here, but those are the margins when you're at Ohio State. Like, there is no acceptable reason that you don't win that game. It doesn't matter what your roster looks like. I throw the recruiting rankings out, throw your records out. We don't care. Win that game. And, 3 years in a row, they haven't. So now everything is being extra scrutinized, even beyond, your normal. Ohio State's always under scrutiny, let's be real. But now we're like 7 levels deep, where it's, hey, our left guard didn't eat a banana at breakfast today, and Twitter freaks out about it. So now I think we're to the point where Ryan has built such a pressure cooker for himself. Will isn't running from it. Caleb isn't running from it. Jeremiah isn't running from it. You're looking at all of these players that have been there and done that, whether here or elsewhere. And you're watching them sit there and basically adopt natty or bust. And it's a lot. It's a lot, because you're talking about 18 to 21-year-olds. We don't talk about them this way, right? It's not. We don't talk about them as college age kids. You know what the hell you did in college, Ron.
I know. As you started to say that, I started to think about what I was like at 19, 20 years old in college, and like just in general, like, I mean, I just think about like how different life is as a college student, and like how you're like the expectations that are put on them, like they are 50-year-old adults and should have all the life experience in the world, and they're still just going through life as an 18, 19, 20-year-old. I mean, I could remember walking into class and seeing people covered in leaves, and it's like, what happened to you? It's like, oh, I got locked out of my apartment last night coming home from the bar and slept in the yard, and now I'm here for a test. And it's like, you're an adult. Like, what's going on? So to like place these high expectations on kids at the end of the day is very difficult. One more question before we move on from the Kyle McCord talk. We're supposed to be talking about the Buckeyes. I mean, 10, 12 years in the NFL holding a clipboard on whatever team Marv is playing for. Like, does that seem like destined to happen, that like some team's going to fall in love with Kyle, take him in a late round, and then he's going to end up being the camp arm for Marv for the rest of his career?
I think when you look at what Kyle gives you, he's going to be pushed up probably around round and a half over what his tape would suggest he is, which right now is an early day 3 guy. He's probably, in my opinion, at the moment, like a late 4th, early 5th round pick. Now, it only takes one team to fall in love with you, as we've seen with your Johnny Manziel's, your Tim Tebow. It takes one team.
One homeless guy to believe in you.
Right. You just need one desperate owner that wants jersey sales. But, all things considered, Kyle's arm is definitely an NFL arm, and there just aren't a ton of them. So, people fall massively in love with the idea that, hey, he has the arm, we can turn him into an NFL quarterback, which, let's be real, it works sometimes, but not all the time. I just have a feeling that by the end of this, when I'm in Green Bay in April, I have a feeling that he's probably going to be a day 2 guy. And someone's going to be sitting there like, hey, we have this late 3rd round pick. Do we take this safety from Tulsa, or do we take the quarterback from Syracuse that, if you squint hard enough, kind of looks like Jay Cutler?
Or the quarterback that Ryan Day took over J.J. McCarthy. Like, Ryan Day was once a trusted NFL mind. So, I mean, people might see that and say, I mean, Ryan wanted him.
It's and like again, recruiting rankings are not everything, but they do tell you something. And wisdom of a crowd has been a lot of what people value at this point, and they should. When you have 100 people, that's going to be a better sample size than when you have 10 people. And I think when you look at recruiting rankings and players that were pursued by multiple colleges, yeah, sometimes they suck. Sorry, Jackson Arnold. Just ain't it, my guy. Just ain't it, my guy. Like it's pretty clear at times when the 5-star is not a 5-star. But you saw some stuff last year that your average QB, like especially Power 5, couldn't be. And we kind of made the argument last year. This is what it looks like when you go from a top 3 or a top 5 QB in the NCAA to a top 20, which, when he transferred to Syracuse, it wasn't necessarily hey, you're not good enough to play here. It's just, look, like we have to improve the baseline of that position more than where you were. And I think, Kyle's figured out a lot of stuff this year, especially stuff that I think will help him at the NFL level. But there's still a lot of work to do there in terms of being that guy, in terms of, being an NFL QB and piloting a true 5-step drop back game anywhere in the league. If he gets to a Shanahan, a Kubiak, a Mike McDaniel, a Sean McVay, I think they will help him a lot in terms of maximizing whatever that arm talent can be. But your hope is basically that he doesn't end up in some organization that just doesn't care about offense and leaves him to die. So
I'm going to get our special guest of the day. Welcome to the show, QP Ski. How you doing? How's the internet?
Special guest is crazy.
I'm surprised you don't have a bonnet on. You were outside in the rain trying to fix your antenna, getting the internet going.
I did what I had to do. What's going on, fellas?
Nothing much. I'll ask you guys both this question. Do you feel like, and I don't know how this turned into the Kyle McCord show, do you feel like that Kyle and quarterbacks thereafter are going to be unfairly judged because we never gave CJ the credit for the quarterback that he was at Ohio State due to the accolades that he missed out on, the losses to Michigan, the lack of Big Ten championships? Because you can look at the stats, you can watch the film. CJ Stroud is a better quarterback than Justin Fields. Justin Fields is, I would argue, probably damn near every Ohio State's fan's favorite quarterback that's ever played here, just because he had that square jaw mentality, that go to work and do your job type of mentality, and then at the same time could bust out a 70-yard run and dance in the end zone better than Kyle McCord. Like, I feel like everybody fell in love with Justin because it was the best of both worlds. He could make the deep passes that Dwayne could, but he could run like JT and Braxton. So I felt like CJ was living in the shadow of everybody finally getting their golden child in Justin, and they didn't appreciate CJ for what he was. And then, since they didn't appreciate what they had in CJ, they assumed everyone could do that because, CJ's not Justin, and neither is this guy, but he should be as good as CJ, right? And then you see CJ in the NFL.
No.
You have Kyle as the quarterback. It seems like people had expectations that they didn't appreciate what CJ actually was at Ohio State.
What CJ was at Ohio State was a gift from God. There was let's be totally real here. 2022 Ohio State, down 2 tight ends, down multiple alignment, down 3 running backs, down 2 wide receivers, had absolutely no business playing a game against Georgia. Like, that's not as great as I think our program is and as good as the depth in that game was, we had no business being in that game, much less leading at any point. That is quarterback putting on the superhero cape and delivering you a gift that, that last drive withstanding. Again, even on the last drive, everybody in our entire fan base screamed the entire year, why won't you fucking run? Because they told him not to. It's literally that simple. The simplest answer is often the best. Like, they told him straight up, we have nothing behind you. Do not expose your body to hits. And then you get to Northwestern in a driving rainstorm, and they ran him selectively. I mean, he ran a lot, but it wasn't, we're not running you in the middle of a defense. We're running you to the edges, and, we're going to get you your yards, and we're going to try and win that game in that manner. But I think when you look at what CJ was, asking anybody to be CJ is totally unrealistic because he is probably the single best Ohio State quarterback ever. And I don't say that lightly. There's so much that went into that. If you go back and you look at what he looked like against Oregon, there was so much to take away from that was positive, even though that game was lost and even though the team sucked that day. There's so much there that you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, if this kid gets 5% better by the end of the year, you're looking at a Heisman Trophy candidate. You're looking at, a player that is absolutely.
But I think you're evaluating that from your informed eye and decision while you're talking about people saw CJ at Oregon and said if he gets 5% better, he could be a Hall of Famer. There were people that watched that Oregon game and said, give me Kyle fucking McCord as a true freshman.
Yeah.
So I think you're having some revisionist history with your knowledge and evaluation process because you were able to see it. But a lot of fans that didn't have a trained eye didn't know what they were seeing, and they saw a guy go out there and throw the ball 53 times and still lose, and that's all they saw.
Right. Yeah, look, Q, who's the most popular guy on the team? It doesn't matter who your squad is. Who's the most popular guy on the team?
Right now?
Well, not right now because we have a unique situation that this doesn't necessarily apply to. But every other team except for this year, because this guy not very popular. But on most teams,
be the quarterback.
Yeah,
the backup quarterback for Ohio State this year. It's the backup quarterback.
And the funniest part about it is everyone assumes that the backup quarterback comes in and the offense just finds its rhythm and everything works out exactly as it should. Receivers are holding blocks longer, tight ends are chipping better, O-line's blocking better, running backs are finding holes they didn't have. That's the dream. It's very idealistic in the sense that, hey, this isn't good enough, something else has to be better. And there are times where fans, it's fair to say that most, like 99% of the time, they're wrong about that. But it is fair to acknowledge the times where they're right. And Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma is a perfect example of that. Like, look, brother, I know you were a 5-star. Stop giving the other team the fucking ball. I don't give a shit what else.
But they got it wrong the first time. They said, get Dylan Gabriel the fuck out of here. The backup's better. And we're wrong.
Brother, Michael Hawkins might do something, but my God, that's a tough scene to be in. Q, you got to give us your one-on-one on the QB room.
Man, I mean, I would say here going back, talking CJ for a little bit. I mean, I think we all were robbed of what we could have had with CJ due to the circumstances because that Georgia CJ just was not the one we've gotten even that we saw. I think a little bit we wanted a little more of that, but we did get to see when CJ got to sit pretty. It was Michigan State. Like they black there and blocked. You let wide receivers run what we really had. So yeah, I think any quarterback is going to be judged unfairly behind him because as strictly as an arm talent, I mean, that's not walking through every year. Justin Fields didn't throw like that. Yeah, maybe go back to Dwayne Haskins to be like, okay, if you're talking arm talent, that's probably the one who maybe could hold his jock strap there. But at least we don't have the catastrophe at Oklahoma. I will say that. I mean, I don't know. When you looked at Dylan Gabriel's stats, and we talked about this in the offseason, we talked about transfer quarterbacks. I mean, he was really the guy that Ohio State sort of wanted to do his stats. He was the best of any of the transfer quarterbacks throwing in basically all categories, maybe except one or two. So for them to say, oh, Jackson Arnold was the next guy.
Definitely wasn't the best in deep ball. The best available deep ball passer in the transfer portal was Kyle McCord.
Besides we don't have to do this. We don't have to do this.
Also, he was showing the Marv. He said, "Buddy's out there somewhere." So.
I saw Will Howard try to do that last week. It didn't look the same.
Yeah, the DB's out there somewhere.
You look at like a Cam Ward at Miami is a great example, and he was a guy that kind of we looked at as somebody that Ohio State should probably target. Yeah, he drastically raises your ceiling as an offense because he's capable of doing things that most other QBs just aren't. But the floor would have been a lot lower. And I think that their idea was ultimately, hey, if we have a quarterback that we can trust to run these 7 or 8 things about as well as they can, and if we can pay Caleb Downs and Seth McLaughlin and all these guys to come to Columbus, Quinshon Judkins, who, by the way, zapped by lightning, man.
We can end this Kyle McCord special and just jump right into Quinshon Judkins, because that was going to be the next guy we talk about. And I'm going to ask the same question that I asked you about Will Howard. Better than expected, worse than expected, or exactly what you expected?
Another gift from God, brother. What the fuck are we talking about here? Like,
they need to move touchdown Jesus
you and I,
Columbus, because he's watching over us right now.
No. The three of us are fully aware of how good TreVeyon Henderson is, right? Like, there's no. It was basically a health question. Like, how healthy will you be, and how good is the O-line in front of you? We have no questions about how good TreVeyon Henderson is. He walks in the door and looks like fucking Alvin Kamara, Jahmyr Gibbs, whatever, like, lightning zapped running back you want to talk about from the last half decade. And he's potentially RB2? What the hell? What is this team, dude? I don't understand how you sit there and you have Trey, who's been home run hitter, great between the tackles, excellent blocker. Like, you're talking about a player that the NFL would have considered in round 1 a decade ago. Then you bring in another one with a different skill set that is probably even more tuned to potentially split out wide and run routes and, do all the things that Chip Kelly wants his running backs to do. Now you have both of them. And so we haven't seen it yet. I'm assuming they're going to bust this out against Oregon. It's just an assumption. But I think that you're probably going to see a formation out there where you get 11, like true 11 personnel. It's going to be 3 wide receivers, but it's going to be 2 running backs instead, where you have, Will, Trey, Q, and then our 3 wide receivers. And somebody's going to have to pray to God about what you do against that, because I don't know. I've sat there and I asked a defensive coordinator the other day, like, hey, if they bust this out, what would you do? And he goes, just hope to get to the next play. like, what do you do? What do you do? Because there's too much speed at every position on the field. And then when you look at a guy like Jeremiah that solidifies your X, when you look at what Marv did last year, right? They were trying very hard, offensively at least. They were trying very hard to establish their identity as something other than throw to 18. They were looking for it all year. You saw them, in any moment that they didn't have to soul search, in any moment they weren't getting kind of in a trenches fight. The idea was, we can establish something that's not throw to 18. They've totally abandoned that. It's, hey, if 4 is open, throw him the fucking ball. Get out the way. We don't care anymore. And I think that that's a lot of a Chip Kelly influence, and the run game looks totally different. The O-line looks significantly better, and I don't think that that's by accident. No, it's not a Justin Fry product. That's
that was
going to
be my next question. I was going to say, before we get out of here, a guy that we had a lot of criticism for before the season. You saw him pick things up a little bit in recruiting. You're starting to hear Ohio State's name affiliated with some offensive line flips. I asked for 2 things after the McFarland signing. I thought that was a great pickup. I think he's a super underrated talent. I said, go get me 2 more guys that are above 6'5" and weigh 300 pounds. And they're in on it. I don't care their ranking. I'm not going to judge you. I think Carter Lowe's a good get. I think McFarland's a good get. If you round it out with 2 more 300-pounders that are over 6'5", I'm fine with Justin Fry. I'm happy with the way the offensive line is playing. Do you feel like Justin Fry has done enough from his improvements in recruiting, what he's been able to add to that class, the names that they're involved with, and then the improvement that we've seen on the field? Has Justin Fry done enough to save his job through 5 weeks? Because it felt like he was on the hot seat preseason.
No. And the reason that I say no is you're spending money in the transfer portal to get the best players available in America. You're spending the money in NIL to get the best players in America. If you're at Ohio State, there is no excuse at any point for your offensive line to look the way that it looked the past couple of years until you get to a Georgia game. Like, Yes, in moments they've looked very good, but that to me is not enough. I get it. I understand why people love him. Like I understand why people are saying like, "Oh, there's still something here." Look, this is not Larry Johnson. There is not an established track record of an excellent O line that he's put together here. Elsewhere, absolutely, and that's fine, and we can have that discussion as we see fit. But until you do it here, this was exactly what we talked about 2 years ago with Jim Knowles. The Oklahoma State defense was awesome. They were so good. What are you going to do with Ohio State's pieces? Well, it takes a year. There's a split there, right? Where you're taking in the guys that you have and you're trying to figure out what the best system to run with them is. We've seen Justin Frye for long enough, and I'm not suggesting that he needs to be fired tomorrow, and I'm not suggesting that there is a built-in replacement for him. But you know who Chip brought in as the assistant O-line coach, and you know what the pipeline looks like, and there is an inherent backup plan. And again, it's like we talked about Devin earlier. You don't bring in a backup plan if you like what you have to start with.
Agreed. A couple more questions before we get out of here. Linebacker. A lot of high hopes for Sonny Styles coming into this season, of the second lowest graded defender by PFF last week, despite having the most snaps at linebacker. What is going on?
I'm going to throw this to Q because he probably has an Arvell Reese soliloquy.
If you want to throw it to me, personally here, I came here on Monday and I said through 4 weeks, I don't think Sonny Styles has been bad. I thought in the first 3 games he sort of fit the bill, and it's what we thought we were. Yes, he did have a bad game, but let's not forget, and we've said here year after year after guys have had bad games, we did not ask if the linebacker experiment was going array, and that was after 5 seasons of playing linebacker.
So, I mean, we had an all Big Ten caliber linebacker, and I had the 2020 vision through my Buckeyes to see that Tommy Heismanberg was elite.
And I also saw him get thrown into steel chambers and get blocked by one guy. So I'm not going to act like it's been all roses. What I will say here is at linebacker, I think we've realized that C.J. Hicks needs to have more of a pass rusher role if he's going to be out there. And still get some snaps so he can still adjust. Arvell Reese has been that dude, like I said, all offseason. He's probably looked the part the most. And I think Cody Simon, we know what he's good at. Inside the box, I think he's a really good linebacker. Out in space, I'd say, maybe it sometimes leaves something to be desired. So I think they all fit kind of different parts here, which you can put.
But what part does Sonny currently fit?
He's an edge rusher. Stop trying to play him anywhere else.
No,
he's an outside 3-4 backer.
And here's the thing.
He can cover a tight end. I think he does that.
No, and that's what I'm saying. He's a 3-4 outside backer. If you project him up a level, that's what he is.
And I think his trajectory got thrown off by him leaving high school a year early and allowing him to pretend to be a safety because his body hadn't fully developed in the position that he should have been playing. If he stayed in high school and plays another year linebacker instead of a 6'3" strong safety as a junior, and then comes to college and is playing nickel at Ohio State because he's a 17-year-old playing against Georgia. It's like, oh my God, he's not just this massive nickel. He's this 17-year-old child that's an edge rusher that you have playing nickel because his body still hasn't fully developed. And now you have him playing linebacker, 3rd position in 3 years. Why?
This is the Urban Meyer problem. So like if you go back to what he did at Florida, right? If you played corner or DB in general in high school, he wanted to at least try you at backer. If you played backer in high school, he wanted to try you at D-line. And his idea was basically, if you develop into the body type to be that kind of player, then you'll have the instincts of a position that requires much more, physical prowess.
It's like the Anthony Davis effect. The guy was 6'1" until his junior year of high school and played point guard his entire life.
Yeah.
And then magically is 6'11" now and grew at the end of life after developing all of the ball skills of someone that can handle the point, cover on the perimeter. And that's how you have a freak show at center, because he spent the first 17 years of his life playing point guard.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best example of this for me is Darren. Like Darren Lee is absolutely not an NFL linebacker. Anybody that's ever looked at an NFL linebacker knows you cannot play NFL linebacker the size that Darren was. First round draft pick, he's a safety. Like at up a level, he's a safety. And any and everybody in his camp was trying to tell him, look, dude, you need to drop 15 pounds and play safety, because at 220 at your size, you'd be a really good one. Maybe not the best in the league and maybe not live up to your draft capital, but in the same way, you know, we're watching Isaiah Simmons is a great example. At Clemson, he was a game wrecker. He was awesome. Harold Perkins at LSU, you know, tore his ACL and that sucks. Wish the best for him, but there's no position for him in the NFL. There are not 210-pound edge rushers in the league. They don't exist. So when you kind of try to project these guys up a level and when you see what they do best, I think the tough part for Ohio State's coaching staff is you want to do what's best by these kids and get them into their NFL position. But at the same time, Sonny's being asked to play a position that I don't think he'll play in the NFL right now. And, you know, how quickly do they change?
Do you think that Sonny Styles is an every down player in the NFL? Because from what I've seen in 2 years, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like a guy that is going to be used on a team that can afford the example that that my guy Cam gave me the other day was like the Cowboys would go crazy with a Sonny Styles. They would find all the ways in the world to use him and get him on the field, but he wouldn't be an every down player.
No, I think the talent is obviously an every down player, but the body type and what I think he does best is probably not. If you make him a pure edge rusher, if you make him a 3-4 outside backer, you have an outside shot of getting him there. Because, I mean, the coverage skills are solid for someone of his size.
For a linebacker, I don't think they're solid for a safety. I don't think he's a plus coverage safety, and I think he's an above average
You need to move him down.
linebacker.
You need to move him down, not up. If you try to play him at safety, the problem is safety is so much about instincts and understanding pattern recognition and being able to get to a spot a quarter second early. And look, like he's a phenomenal football player. It's a lot like he reminds me so much of Jalen Hurts in Philly, and by that what I mean is he's a much better football player than he is quarterback. And if you dissect what he is as a quarterback, it's not as much as you want it to be, given that he's a great football player. And you know, I think we have a few guys that have fallen into that category. I gave you out Isaiah Simmons. I think Harold Perkins obviously falls in there. I think Sonny falls in there too, where someone is going to have the wrong idea about how to maximize what he is. Let him go do what he does. It's literally that simple. What is his best attribute? Rushing the quarterback. Let him go do it. Like, it doesn't have to be hard.
So I have two questions for you guys before we get out of here. We're a little short on time. Do you feel like, well, one, the first question is, what do you feel like the best linebacker pairing is for this defense? And the second question is, do you feel like this defense would be benefited best by what I believe is the best pairing of linebackers, Arvell Reese and Cody Simon as your base linebackers, and then find the most creative ways to use CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles and as not every down players, but I feel like the stars next to their name, their last names, and what they've given to the program this far has made this staff hesitant to take guys like that off the field and use them. But I feel like this defense has such a surplus in talent that is what takes it to the next level, where you don't have to have those guys on the field just because of their star ranking or their last name or them being in the program for 2 and 3 years, where your best linebackers, to me, are Cody Simon and Arvell Reese. You have two guys that are specialists and do particular things as well. Let them do those things great, and let the two best base linebackers play in your base defense.
You want me to go first? Or you want it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I will say, I'm always agreeing with, if you have guys that are really good at certain traits, use them for it. I think we've had defenses where we've seen them not do that repeatedly, and made them try to do multiple things down the line. I'd say definitely with CJ and Sonny, you see their athletic traits. We've seen all across the country where people will put these kind of guys and let them go off. I could say you do that. I don't think any. And I don't think we've treated really anybody on this defense as every down player. We've had a constant rotation. We've tried to mix and match. We've tried to do different things. So I don't think they've certainly put guys in a box. But yeah, if you want to get the most out of these guys and their athletic traits, I would say being creative with those guys and using them effectively is the best way. And I don't know if we've exactly seen that yet. We've said it over and over again. This pass rush has again left a little bit to be desired through the first 4 weeks, especially if you look at guys' win rates on the edge. We could definitely use a little bit of juice there. So I would love to see a little bit of more mix and match and letting these guys maybe line up and just say, hey, go get the quarterback. And maybe it's some other stuff down the line as they continue to develop.
Yeah, I think, particularly Marshall's a great example of this, where I think Ohio State kind of for a second thought, we're just going to run our base defense. We're going to adjust to them and everything's going to be normal. And they threw a few things out there that, Ohio State hadn't seen yet. And it's a great message to the linebacker unit as a whole. Yeah, you have really good DBs behind you. Yes, you have excellent players, all NFL guys in front of you. But ultimately speaking, gap integrity is about you. Playing linebacker is not about playing linebacker as much as it is assisting your safeties and your DNs, as good as that unit is. So, I think when you kind of look at what linebackers should be, you think about the guys at Ohio State that have made names for themselves. You look at your Laurinaitis, you look at your Katz and Moyers, you look at your AJ Hawks, your
Tommy
Bobby
Eichenbergs.
and look, like, you need people that will play linebacker. And the obsession, right? And I gave Q shit about this last year, is everyone wants athletes at linebacker. You want linebackers that look like safeties and play like backers. That's what you want. You want somebody that can cover like a safety but actually play linebacker. Those guys are so few and far in between that if you have your choice, truthfully, at this point, between a linebacker and a project that has athleticism, choose the linebacker. I think that it says a lot that they're willing to rotate Sonny in there. I think that it says a lot that, CJ has a role. I think at some point it'll be really interesting to see if they ever go 3 linebackers or even 4.
We've actually seen a few 3 linebacker packages so far this year.
I know. And so it's going to be interesting to see, especially if they ever get to 4 goal line situations, whatever, where you have your 4 backers out there and you can kind of watch them individually do their jobs in succession and grade them on that. Because I think what's so tough about it is you're shuffling all these guys in there trying to figure out who are our best backers. And they're being asked to do different things than what their best role is, as we talked about earlier. I think the tough part about finding the right linebacker unit here is it's a lot like offensive line. So I think, when you look at linebacker unit, and I'm interested to see what you guys think about this. So I think that we talk about offensive lines and defensive lines and wide receivers and cornerbacks in a really mismanaged manner. And by that, what I mean is I think there are 2 separate kinds of units that you can have. One is a weak link unit. You're only as good as your worst player there. The other, I think, is you have what I would call an alpha unit, where a really good player can carry the entire unit on their own. And I think D-line and wide receiver are alpha units. You can have one player that totally wrecks a game, whether you're looking at like Julio Jones at Bama when they didn't have a very deep receiving core, or you're looking at like a Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa for us, where one-man wrecking crews. Whereas you look at offensive line and cornerback, you're only as good as your worst player is there, because you're just going to attack them over and over and over again. Michigan found that out when they played against Texas. And so I think when it comes to linebacker at Ohio State, the concern is if that becomes a weak link unit, who do you feel comfortable putting out there? If it becomes a strength, though, they're going to be able to dictate what offenses are allowed to do. And that's the goal. If you're a defensive coordinator, your goal is always to be able to play offense on defense. You tell them what they can do. They're not telling you jack shit. So I think, if that room develops in the way that we want them to, and the freak is always that our CJ and Sonny kind of figure it out, it's one thing. But in terms of saying, hey, Cody and Arvell are probably our two best real linebackers, yeah, you're not wrong about that at all.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that room shakes out. I've had the frustration of at Ohio State where I guess it's a good selling point. Like, hey, come here and play what position you want to play. And I'm like, fuck that. It's not your choice, man. Tell them where they play best. Like, this ain't follow your dreams, you. This is win a fucking natty, you. I think about Tyreek Johnson, the 5-star that transferred to Nebraska and pretended to be a corner for 3 years at Ohio State. And it's like, everybody knew you were a safety. Like, no shit, you're not a 5-star cornerback. Like,
yeah.
I'm sorry, you're a safety. Like, a lot of Cade Stover, he wants to be a linebacker. He wants to be a tight end. Like, pick one, pick a position and make them play it. I hate this. We're going to see at the end of the season and let them pick. Like, I would love to see how many times Nick Saban asked to where do you want to play? You can either play here, you can either play at this position at Alabama or Arkansas. Like, your choice. Drew Sanders.
I'm also interested to see. I mean, we've done 3 seasons now where I feel like the linebacker position has been the mark in these big games, and that's where they went to expose.
3 seasons? Did you miss the natty?
Yeah,
somewhere our boy Tough Borland is still running.
What about me? I've been a problem for 4 seasons.
With the current list, list of guys, we've done a couple seasons where the guys have been the mark. I'm interested to see when we play at Oregon or some of these better teams how they kind of try to expose this defense. Because you feel like the defensive line is going to be the same. We know the secondary is what it is. Where will they exactly attack this linebacker unit? So that's what I'm interested to see.
I think if you're Oregon's coaching staff, if you're Dan Lanning and, the guys up in Eugene, I think the easiest way to attack what Ohio State has put on film so far is to condense the game in a lot of ways. You'd put 2 tight ends out there. You're going to ask the defensive ends to be NFL defensive ends. You're going to have to ask the defensive tackles to maintain gap integrity. And then you're going to dare the linebackers to actually play linebacker. And that's the beauty of what Ohio State's offense and defense allow you to do. You're watching quarterbacks not have to play quarterback at the college level. At the NFL level, you got to play quarterback. But at this level, you don't necessarily have to. Tennessee is a great example of that. At the same time, at Ohio State, you don't really have to play linebacker like you play linebacker. But someone is going to come along. It may be Texas. It may be Oregon. It may be Georgia. It may be Michigan, whoever it is. Someone at some point is going to force you to play linebacker. And I'm interested to see how Ohio State handles the situation where your linebackers have to be linebackers.
If they start calling us soft again, I'm burying my head in the sand. Like, I can't take it anymore. But I am 11 minutes late for work. I gotta wrap the show, but we got to circle back after the Oregon game and get your thoughts after the first big game that the first big test for the Buckeyes. Do you want to give a prediction that we can revisit when we have you back on?
Yeah. So preseason, I thought that Oregon would beat Ohio State. That was just my understanding. There are too many new pieces here. There's too much going on. I think that game probably looks something like a 27-21, 27-24 Ohio State win at the moment. But that's TBD, right? Like, that's a really good defense. It's a really good offense. And the thing is, when you play against really bad teams, you don't have to show anything. So I don't think we've seen what Ohio State's offense will actually look like. I don't think we've seen what Oregon's offense will actually look like. And I think that's probably the first real test for either of them. So it's going to be exciting to watch those two coaching staffs pull everything out because, as much fun as it is to watch Ohio State, Michigan State, we're not going to take a ton from this, man. Like it is. It's just another test that, you got to pass and keep it moving. But obviously October 12th is a totally different story. So I think I've gone from Oregon wins that game because they're a better team at home, and it's kind of a split 50-50, to now I think Ohio State's probably the better team and wins on the road at that point, but it's going to be close.
I appreciate you joining us on in. I see a Notre Dame fan in the chat saying that our O-line plays like Stevie Wonder. He would know, being that his quarterback plays like Stevie Wonder. Shout out Riley Leonard. So yeah, that's our show today. Q, let the people know where they can find you. I mean, anyone that wants to find me, they can find me at work in seconds.
Well, when my internet's working, I will be City Boy Quitting on Twitter. Find it Johnson in Minor League Phil. Not hard to find. On it. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, it's at Nanduri NFL on Twitter. And, obviously I love hanging out with these guys and talking Buckeye ball. So I will be back soon. Appreciate you guys for having me.
Where can people find your NFL content regularly?
Yeah, so, I used to host, still do a podcast called Decision Point on Roto Underworld, where we discuss kind of like what NFL GM's jobs actually are and, the inner workings of what a front office should look like. But at this point, we're on the road 24/7, man. So, the next time that I tap in, it'll be in some hotel room and God knows where. So excited to talk ball all the time, obviously, with you guys. But you can find me on Twitter. And if you ever need anything, hit my line.
Absolutely. We appreciate you joining us. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at 2Ts. It's 2_TES. If you missed it yesterday, we were live in the Bleacher Report app. If you want a full Michigan State game preview, you can check out me and Chris Drew in the Bleacher Report app. Maybe we will air that at some point today or tomorrow. But we do have a special guest tomorrow. Our guy Pat will be joining us from Menace to Sports. So be sure to tune in tomorrow. And you guys know how this ends. Go Bucks and OH.
I hope.
Yeah.